Hello, it's Jennifer McGuire, and thanks so much for stopping by for another video. Today I'm going to show you how to really stretch your stamps and take a floral stamp set and create apples from them. I love to take stamps and use them in ways that they weren't originally intended, and today is a pretty good example of that. I'll also show you some inking techniques along the way. I will be using this gorgeous stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I love the playful scribble flowers. So you see in the bottom there's like the scribbly circle and then the solid shape right above it. And these are intended to layer on top of each other. Well, they're supposed to be flowers, I believe, but I decided to turn them into apples today. So let's go ahead and start with the stamping. I'm starting with the solid shape. I'm going to stamp this with Hero Arts Shadow Ink and Pale Tomato. This is like a soft red color. Absolutely any inks will work for this technique. I just like these inks and the Simon Says Stamp inks because they smooth out and even out as they dry. You get a nice good coverage. Next, I'm going to ink the same image up with a little bit darker ink. This is Lipstick Red from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to dab off some of the ink from the ink stamp before I stamp it directly over the images I've already done. So you can watch this again. I'll ink up the whole stamp, but then I'll dab away some with a dry cloth. I'll dab away some of the ink, just like on half of it, and then stamp directly over one of my apples. The reason I'm doing this is it gives a darker edge, like a shadowed edge, to my apple. If you would have just only inked half of the stamp, you would have seen a distinct line. So by dabbing it away with a cloth, it kind of fades or blends out. And because these inks kind of blend and even out over time as they dry, what will happen is this will blend into each other and you get a nice light to dark look. But again, you can try this with whatever inks you have. It just really works well with the Hero Art Shadow Inks and the Simon Says Stamp inks. It also works well with pigment inks. Okay, so now I have my apples, and look at that shading. The ones on the right, by the way, haven't dried as much as the ones on the left, so you can see that starts to blend over time. So now it's time for the cute little leaf to go on the top of the apple, and so I'm going to use one of the solid leaf images from that same stamp set, and I'm stamping this with Green Hills ink from Hero Arts. Now again, this is going to look splotchy and uneven at first, but when it dries it will even out. So after I've done all of my leaves in the lighter green, I'm going in with a darker green. This is Field Greens from Hero Arts, and I am inking up the whole stamp once again and then dabbing away like the top half of the leaf so that only the bottom half of the leaf has that darkness to it. It's not real visible here on the camera, but it does make a difference, when this all dries out. For my stem, I'm just drawing it in with a Copic marker. You can use any kind of marker or brush or pencil here. I just find that Copics are pretty quick and easy to use. And I add a little shadowing on the bottom, or shading on the bottom, with a darker color of Copic. Okay, so now it's time to do those squiggles on top of some of the apples. I'm using Red Royal ink from Hero Arts. So you can see that squiggle circle I'm using in the bottom. It's sized perfectly to go over this solid image. I decided to only do the squiggle on some of the apples, not all of them. And I also have the squiggle to go on top of the leaf. Now those will dry a little bit and it'll kind of blend into each other. It'll be really fun. I just did some apples plain and some with the scribbles. Finally, I went ahead and cut out the apples, and I ended up with 7 of them. I'm making these for a bunch of teachers' cards and for helpers at the school because I think all the people at the school just completely rock for what they do. Now, I wanted to keep this card pretty simple so the focus would be on the fun apple, but I thought something interesting like a diagonal piece would be fun. I have this die from Little Inker. I love this die because it cuts a diagonal piece, perfect for a card, and it does a stitched edge around it and inside of it. So I'm just cutting it from some Desert Storm Nina cardstock. This is a great soft craft color. Now you'll see here how it cuts. There is a stitched line in the die cut piece itself, which I'm going to use on the card. And then check out the negative space. There's a stitched line around it too, which I think is the coolest thing ever. So you could use both, and I like that you can get more out of one die. Now I went ahead and cut a bunch of these pieces, and now I'm going to white heat emboss this thanks message. This is another Simon Says Stamp set. I love that it's tall and narrow. The font is tall and narrow, so you can fit it along a card easily. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp this with Versamark ink and add some of my favorite white embossing powder, which is Hero Arts white embossing powder. It's definitely the brightest white with the best results. So I went ahead and did this on all the strips, and I'm zapping it with my heat gun to go ahead and heat set it, and I just love the look of a white embossed image against a colored cardstock. Now, as I mentioned, I want to keep this card pretty simple, but I wanted something interesting in the background. So I'm using a thin stripe background stamp from My Favorite Things and a super soft ink, which is Simon Says Stamp Fog ink. I think you can never go wrong with the stripe background, and I like this stamp because you can stamp it horizontal or vertical on a card. And that little bit of stripe in the background adds some interest but isn't too distracting. Now this will be a little uneven at first, but it'll dry nice and even, and it's a great simple background. And even though the background ink is stamped in gray and this piece is craft, they actually kind of go together. That gray fog ink seems to match absolutely everything. It's definitely a must-have color. So I like dimension on my cards. I'm a dimension aholic. Is that the way to say it? Anyways, I'm addicted to dimension, so I'm using some foam tape to add this diagonally. And look how nice this just pops right into your card. I like that this die takes all the thinking out of doing the diagonal piece. Now I want to add my apple, but I got to be a little careful here. What I'm going to do is put a little bit of foam tape on the back of the apple itself, so it's popped up. And then I need to do 2 layers of foam tape behind the leaf because the apple is going to be sitting on the craft piece, which has a foam piece underneath it already. So I need 2 pieces to be even on my leaf. I don't know, I think about these kind of things when I put my cards together so that the apple lays nice and flat but lifted off the card. So now it's time to add some finishing touches on the card. Look at, by the way, check out how that background matches the craft pretty well. Now the finishing touches. If you've ever seen my videos, you know that I'm also addicted to Wink of Stella in the clear color. So I'm just scribbling this over all of my apples so it has a little bit of shimmer. Really makes a big difference on a simple card like this one. Hard to capture in the video, but it really is great in real life. Then I die cut a bunch of tiny little hearts, and I am dipping them into some glossy accents and adding them to the little apple here. I think it makes a big difference. I can't decide where to put it. Finally picked a place. These tweezers that kind of grab a hold of the little die cuts, just the best thing ever. And then I'm going to go ahead and coat the heart with some glossy accents also. I like that this serves as an adhesive, but also as a way to add shine onto your projects. So I have a shiny little heart on top of my sparkly little apple. I usually like to stamp something on the inside of my cards too. So from the same stamp set, they have little sentiments that kind of continue on. So I stamp So Very Much on the inside of the card with the lipstick red ink. And pretty quickly, I have a bunch of unique cards put together ready for teachers, taking a flower stamp and stretching it a new way to get some apples. I used some fun supplies in today's video, so if you're interested in any of them, they're linked below in my YouTube description. Or you can click on over to my blog. If you click right here, it'll take you directly to this blog post where I'll have links there and more pictures. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll see you again real soon.